Do you have a favorite?
Not meant to. But mostly the unloved ones. The unvisited ones. The cases that get dusty and ignored. All the broken and shunned creatures. Someone's got to care for them. Who shall it be if not us?
Yes.
Welcome to Rune Soup, a weekly podcast about magic, culture, and the very best new and old ideas for living in this world. Coming to you from 43 degrees south on a small farm in deepest Tasmania. My name is Gordon, and I shall be your host. This week, third time's a charm, and it is certainly charms we be needing these days. We welcome back Peter Jenkins, aka Jenx, to the show to talk about whatever else but Thai occultism. Jenx joins us on the occasion of the launch of the final book in his multi-year project, and that book is called the Thai Occult Appendix. So in this episode, we talk more about spirit houses and why you should think twice about installing them, angels in Thai occultism, Thai astrology, cave spirits, and the Thai Animist version of the story of a wacky billionaire and some trapped schoolboys. I think you know the ones I mean. Very good stuff. Enjoy. Jenx, the moment has arrived. Welcome back.
Thank you very much indeed. It was touch and go for a while.
It was. So we have a new book. We have the appendix. Does this mean the great journey has brought itself to an end?
Well, the appendix really is to answer the questions that arose from the big book. Now, let's kind of discuss the big book as well in relation to this. The big book, as I talked to many people about it, was deliberately constructed to follow the Thai saying of mi sen. And it's like, an analogy is like a bowl of noodles. So all the information is all kind of intertwined with each other. But when people understood the book fully, they would be able to unravel it all. Now, unfortunately, it's an extremely complicated subject, of course. But the appendix, and I've not talked to many people yet who have unraveled the subject, and I don't think it's possible to fully unravel it until they visit here. But the appendix, I thought, was necessary to answer the questions that arose from all the people I talked to from the first book and the requests for more information.
Very interesting. That tracks, because there is coming at some familiar topic areas from a different perspective and some kind of clarifying stuff. I will say this too, the photography gets better and better.
Well, that's, if you're saying that this is the end of this series, okay? Well, but there's other things in my mind that I think need doing. And I'm actually drifting towards photography until basically we catch up and understand this subject. So this book, this final appendix, is a bridge between what was and what will be, because there are certain subjects I have actually avoided due to being slightly dodgy or difficult that I'm going to next cover by doing photographic exhibitions. That's my plan, with associated very limited edition books.
I was going to say,
one of the difficult things about posting these bloody things is that the post nowadays is terrible.
Yeah.
And, like a 49-euro book, which is what the appendix is costing €36 to send track post to the USA, which is bloody ridiculous. Yeah.
Yep.
So my future plan is in some way to split any publications between a European publication and an American publication, to take that expense out so we can produce much more expensive books, and it's not going to cost people much more to get them.
Oh, very good. So when you say dodgy, it's not like this book series hasn't been dodgy already. There are less There are a few exciting sexual diagrams in this one, but
Sorry about that, Gordon.
So what are you thinking? Like, when you say it's stuff that can only be done photographically, it's because, follow that thought for me, because there's more. There's not just the actual quality of the photographs, the better. There's I did a film degree, so I noticed these things, but there's like visual storytelling in this one that is a step change. So is that kind of what you mean, that there's stuff that is going to need to be told visually in that sense?
Well, there's subjects within the Thai occult system that I decided not to cover fully, because some of the things in this system are utterly horrific. Yeah? And one of them is the cursing system. And it's my intent to do a small exhibition about that, which is going to be very, very difficult because it is even more hidden than what we've talked about already. I also feel that there's a need to help people understand the Burmese system in a simpler way, because people have not made the link between the systems yet, because there's so much different terminology that we can't see the wood for the trees. And I think to do it as a photographic exhibition with text probably in a similar proportion as the appendix book, but to help and do that specifically for the Burmese system so we can get a better handle on it. Because basically, with the Burmese system, the only thing that's been available so far is anthropological studies. There's been nothing specific towards the magic. And I think a lot could be gained from following that up and helping people understand it in relation to the Thai system.
Yeah, and you're right, and to have it be a product of the lived experience rather than not that there isn't value in the external kind of view that you can get with anthropology, but this one, what I like about your books, and there's more confidence in it in this sense, that you like Bond's in the intro, and you've got friends that are in some of the images getting yants done and so on. Like, it's this is a situated book, which I think is a big part of its power.
We had to show all the Thai occult stuff is new, basically. I'm very proud of the Thai occult book itself, the big one, even though it nearly bloody killed me doing that thing. But I always knew that book would open the world to many people. And as that world opens, people start to visit. As they visit, we experience everything in a different way because the Ajahns deal with everybody as to who they are. And that opens all sorts of other worlds and all sorts of other influences and pulls the family together. And I always knew that if I produced that book, we would end up with kind of an extended family of people who have been attracted by the Thai occult system and the Ajahns within it. And this is and they bring things with them that I can't get on my own, you see.
Yeah. I absolutely know exactly what you mean, to be perfectly honest.
It's odd. You know, I'll give you an instance. Like, people come over sometimes, and one of the first things we do is generally go to see Ajahn Sir, who's my go-to Ajahn, really. I love Ajahn Sir. And he holds hands. Only in the mornings, but he holds hands to view the person and feel the person. Yeah? Now, you will have more experience in this than I will, to be honest with you, Gordon. I've got no idea about how he understands these things, but you never know what's going to come out. And often it's been things like, well, you've had an abortion and the child's hanging on to you and need to let it go. Or recently we had another example where he said there was a deity hanging on to a guy because he hadn't fulfilled his promise when being granted a wish. I've never heard, this is all new all the time. So the more people come, the more doors open to understanding the actual system. And which is why I also wanted to do the appendix book, because we're a year on. And in that year, we've learned an enormous amount, mainly from the people who visit, but also from my continued chats with the Ajahns.
Yeah. Well, they some of them are recurring guests in the books, right? Dare I say, a majority of them. And it's, again, super interesting to see, even if it's areas that have been broached before, different angles on it. And one of the refrains, and this is making more sense to me now that we've begun this discussion, one of the refrains that came up a few times in the book is that there have been changes in the teaching and transmission of magic or the Thai occult over the years. So talk us through that, because this is a moment where some of that is indeed happening, and it involves people from outside Thailand, at least in some small part as well.
They are, the thing about the Thai Ajahns is that because it is their life, they want to be part and continue their lineages or create a new lineage and be part of magic even when they're dead. So they are very open to teaching people and helping an outsider understand the system of teaching and the process of the teaching. This process of the teaching is actually the same as the process within us that I've discussed in the book that we need to fulfill within ourselves to become magic. And then the Ajahn themselves will teach you what you think you need to know and adapt the magic taught to the person involved, which I didn't know until we did this. So in any way, it's kind of a continuation of what I just said about individuals coming and changing things because of everybody's individuality and everybody needing something different. But there are specifics, and they're perfectly, especially Ajahn Apichai is perfectly willing to take on Western devotees, Western luxids. But there is, like going through to be doing a degree, you've got to go to secondary school before. Going to preschool involves being able to communicate, obviously, so you need to learn Thai. It also helps to learn written Thai, because if you know written Thai, you will have an understanding of Kon script, which is the Thai older script that is specifically used for Wichar, for knowledge and for Buddhist teachings and readings. And also there has to be a certain level of understanding of the Buddhist system, because then we can start to open the world itself. Now, it seems that the most important thing of the world itself, and you will have seen this in the book, but again, I always kind of go around the subject until people are ready to absorb it. A lot of it is based on the building of magic within us through meditation and through Buddhist practices. And kata, eventually we embody kata, which is why I keep mentioning kata in every publication. We have to be able to absorb the kata within the body and become magic itself. Ajahn Suh was telling the story about one of the first things Kruba Duandi taught him was the kata, the heart kata, the condensed kata for Kongkrapan, invincibility. And over the weeks and months of reciting it literally all day, either out loud or in his mind, his body absorbs and becomes invincible, absorbs the Kongkrapan. And he was saying that as an expression of it, every now and again he would ask the student to go and shit in the river, and if it sank, Kongkrapan was going into the body.
Cool. That's I mean, yeah, that's awesome.
It's like, that's what this book is about. It's about condensing what we think we know into a more definite tract. Do this, do this, do this. Yeah? And then it become magic.
And there were some parts of it that became clearer to me as a result of that. So, as you mentioned, there's meditation there, and I think it was maybe it wasn't Ajahn Apachai's section, but one of them talking about how if you're going to come over and train or get like an additional consult, it's recommended you do a couple of weeks meditation retreat. And what I found interesting is meditation can change you, and it can also change the space that you're doing it in. So it's this kind of like there's a relationship between things like protection and accumulating merit, isn't there?
Yes. Yeah. Well, there's more of a relation between merit and karma.
Okay.
Protection, merit will provide protection for you, particularly from curses, actually, which is not in the book. If somebody is very meritorious, they're impossible to curse because you can't get past the wall of merit. And merit, which is what the Ajahns work on, to be honest with you. If you link it to the piece by Ajahn Nikom, where he talks about the constant exchange of merit within his life and within the Ajahns' life, of doing things for people to make merit, so then they can spend that merit on looking after the spirits that take care of them and paying back their karma. It is a constantly revolving system. And I think it's not been expressed, but from what we understand of what Ajahn Nikom said, it gets to the point where it's like a water wheel. It constantly turns within the Ajahn, and he likened it to the Ajahns becoming sweet to spirits. Like they become like honey. Within their body, there's a purity that comes that is sweet to spirits and enables them to work with spirits by giving them the merit and working with them, and then they get the merit from helping other people, and it's a constantly revolving circle. But from experience so far, this would take a long time, as with any magic, as with becoming any sort of magician.
Sure.
And would take great dedication.
So just because I want to have an adjacent discussion, but this might be the same one, I'm not sure. So in terms of that sweetening process, is that the result exclusively of... is that an exclusively merit-based process, or do they do? Because this is going to be my question, right? There are ways to ameliorate the effects of karma. There are rituals and so on, which I found fascinating, and I'll get you to describe in a minute. But in terms of the sweetening process of Ajahns, is that because so the water wheel is all merit? It's giving merit to spirits, it's accumulating merit, and so on, or do they do the kind of do they ameliorate their own karma with the rituals that are described in the book?
I think if they have enough merit, they can use some of that merit to pay off the Jaikam Nai Wen. Now, the Jaikam Nai Wen is the warden of your karma. It's a spirit associated with us that kind of dishes out our karma. And it can be paid off to reduce our karma to avoid the excessive effects. Now, again, you've got a lot of merit to do this, and you've got to feel fulfilled with merit to have enough to pay off the Jaikam Nai Wen, to negate any possible negative effects coming. But at the same time, it is very difficult to avoid our karma unless we do that. So with the magic of Thailand, and I think I mentioned this in the last book, magic in this country is to help on day-to-day life, whereas Buddhism is the big picture. Buddhism is the lifelong. Magic helps negate the negativity that comes from astrology and from the effects of karma on a temporary basis. So that's why magic is so popular here and has always been around since Buddhism came and before. But there's not many people can negate the karma that is coming to them, and we can avoid it for as long as we can, but it will always come at some point.
Yeah. I like that you mentioned astrology there. Well, There was a couple of places in the book that angels showed up, and the first time was I think the first time was in the context. Yeah, there was some angel talk going on in the context of land spirits, and I don't think I'd heard that in the book before. But before we get to the kind of like 10 personal angels, what's that about? I mean, what is the sort of Thai magic or Thai occult understanding of angels then?
Oh, God Almighty, that's a bit. To be honest with you, we can only have pieces at the moment. Spirits can become angels when they have accrued enough merit. Like there's an example where even Menag, who is one of the most terrifying spirits in Thai history, her Penang is still in the hands of royalty, but now she left that Penang a long time ago, but became an angel, but magic is still available from that Penang because she is still connected to it, but it is given in a slightly different way. Yeah. When they sometimes refer to angels, we don't know whether it coincides with our understanding of angels. This is going to take a lot longer to understand that. But it appears that there are angels for the 4 directions, and there are angels associated with cycles within the astrology that affect us. And one angel will generally bring the very bad luck that we sometimes get. It's called toksum, when your astrology drops for quite a prolonged period. That angel becomes in control, and that is associated with an astrological aspect. Yeah? I have not studied the astrology, and therefore can't answer that question any more than the way Ajahn Appichai described it, because when he works on somebody, he will generally go find the day of the week or the day of the month where he will find the angel that brings the toksum, that knocks your astrology down, and he attacks through that angel. But as I say, with astrology, I don't know whether angel yet is the correct terminology for that.
It's so there's, I mean, why I find this interesting is I know a little bit about very small bit about astrology. But anyway, so in the book, every person has 10 guardian angels that can either, be beneficial or grant wishes or come at you. And once a year, one of them will come and eat your age, right? Which I think is an amazing description. So in kind of like Hellenistic astrology, depending on where you are, what year of life you're in, there will be a ruling planet for that year. So I'm in a Saturn-ruled annual perfection is what it's called. And so here we have like the seven of the guardian angels are associated with the classical planets and luminaries. And the other 3 are Rahu, which is the north node of the moon, also astrological. And then the other ones are Pragates. And this is where we get to the bit where I'm trying to speak Thai again, so we can all laugh. Okay. And the Mari Tayu. And do you know what either of them are?
No.
Yeah.
But this is the problem with the astrology. I've deliberately not gone into the astrology because I regard it as a separate system. Ajahn Appichai is particularly into astrology and he's very good at his readings.
Yeah. It's got like Pragite is like personal guardian angel, he says later, and Maritayu is the angel of death. So it's super interesting. Like I find it interesting that there isn't an angel for the south node, but there is 10. And this looks like a Thai annual perfection model where like coming in to eat your age is a sort of similar way of saying, well, once you hit your birthday, you click over into another annual perfection. Depending on which year it is, you kind of move to the next house in your chart, and whatever that happens to be and whatever that's ruled by. So super interesting to see the same thing associated with angels here, because of course in the grimoires of the early one, well, even earlier, the earliest grimoires had angels associated with planets. So it was a fun bit that I had looking at they've got a 10 system, but it's still, if I squint at it, there's some sort of combination of angels and annual perfections that I'm sure people listening to the show will be kind of interested in looking at.
The Thais regard the astrology of this country as being about 60% Indian, about 20% Chinese, and about 20% Thai. So they've altered everything that came in through their own experience. It's whenever I talk to other people about the astrology, I get completely different answers. This is the difficulty of it. Ajahn Apichai follows central Thai astrology. The astrology in Lanai region has differences as well. And also when they describe a guardian angel, we've never been able to get a decent answer to that, as opposed to the Daikanai way. You know, we can't find anybody who will tell us what's the difference between, because your guardian angel is also called the Opatika, and the Opatika is, we have to, when cursing somebody, you go for the Opatika, because that is, you attack the guardian angel so it drops so you can get in. Yeah? Nobody yet has given a satisfactory answer, because like all this stuff, like every time we open the subject up in this, there's crumbs going in one direction, but I always feel like there's a full meal on the other side of the door.
Yeah.
And this is literally going to take the rest of my life to get to the bottom of. I get the impression it's at least 10 times bigger than what I currently understand. And I think at some point I'm going to have to go and study the bloody astrology now you brought this up. Probably.
But there'll be people reaching out after listening to this to volunteer to help. It's super interesting that it's in there, and what you just described happens fairly commonly with animist systems, right? Like, so the way indigenous knowledge holders in Australia will treat the knowledge that they hold is they will give you only the amount that you can handle. And consequently, you never get the full bit, but you will also get different versions of it depending on where you are at with your life. And so you probably won't ever get to the bottom of it, but you will certainly get more of that meal, I think.
Well, I liken it a bit to, because I've got a martial arts background, I liken it to martial arts. If you tell somebody something that they're not ready for, you've lost that opportunity. And that opportunity may never occur again because people have already got the incorrect understanding of it.
Yes.
So this is why I have always appreciated how the Ajahns pass on this knowledge, and they also tell me stuff privately that kind of adds morsels to it. And every time I see Ajahn Apichai or see Ajahn Dui or Ajahn Tse in particular, they're always just chucking another couple of morsels in there, partly because they enjoy it, partly because it keeps the whole understanding moving, and like everything, it's got to keep moving, so we keep opening up to it. But we've still not got the key, and Ajahn Bing likened it the best, where he said when he teaches, he gives somebody a key, and they've got to open the door and then build the room.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
And which again is just, I think it's just another way of describing the Australasian concept that you were talking about.
Yeah. One of the bits that it's because in a funny way, like these topic areas are. The fact that we get it piecemeal is sort of reflected in the book, right? Because in the incense section, which was fascinating, like a list of uses or directions or things that you offer incense to. There's talk of incense for the angels of the 10 directions. And now, is that the same as the sort of 10 guardian angels astral? So it's spatial as well. That's awesome. Because I don't know if you're familiar. There's a grimoire called the Heptameron, and it is a daily, because of the angels ruling each of the different planets, which also rules the different days. You essentially set up a different circle and say different things to different angels on each day. So it's like a directional astrological angel practice.
Wow. Okay.
So it's this is fun. That looked really interesting to me. It isn't a 10 direction one like this is, but it would be super interesting to see.
This is what the great thing is with this, though, Gordon. Sorry to interrupt you there, sir. This is what the great thing is with this, though, because the people we're having visiting are all into slightly different forms of magic. So everybody is bringing a broader understanding and allowing a broader understanding of the magic here, because I've never read a magical book deliberately, and I've never actively or constructively practiced magic in the traditional way. And so as people pop in, and some of them have, do celestial magic, some of them follow more Crowleyan stuff, they all bring something with them that opens the view a little wider through the experience of the other people as well. And I think it's important chatting. I always love talking to you, Gordon, because again, you bring all this new stuff in that I don't know, that again enables me to try and find out more because of the outside way. And I think that all, as we've discussed before, it just links the world magic together.
Yeah, it's really fun reading the books because I don't have to. I'm kind of on this kick at the moment about an animist epistemology rather than ontology, and it's really fun reading the book and all the books and seeing the structural similarities that actually produce the objects of knowledge within a Thai system, and to find resonance with it there, because in a way that I think is correctly political. I think that is the non-appropriative level on which to interact cross-culturally. It is to be equals and to see eye to eye, and that happens not in the kind of stacking of the products of knowledge, but in sharing the ways that knowledge is produced. It's at that epistemological level. So it's beautiful. Yeah, and it's a real joy to kind of find that, quote unquote Western magic has Thai cousins. That's great.
Well, I just think we're all tapping into similar streams.
Totally.
Personally, but I think it's the cultural differences. There's only cultural differences piled on top. That's my personal opinion. I think it's pretty much all the same. It's just in different cultural constructs.
Sure, absolutely. One of the other refrains in the book, one of the other refrains through the book series, I suppose, is spirit houses. And I once again learned some new things about them. But I see you have included a warning in this one not to have spirit houses without performing the proper rituals. Now, I speculate you got asked about that a number of times.
More times than I care to mention. It just came up in a conversation with the dancer that people come to Thailand and often buy a small wooden spirit house to take home because they're cute, or because they're a lovely thing. But the problem is wandering spirits can go and live in them. And there is one section of spirit house, one type of spirit house. You'll see, like, suddenly you'll be driving down a country road or up a mountain, and there'll be a whole bend full of spirit houses. But they're not spirit houses in the traditional land sense. They're spirit houses for wandering spirits to do favours for people who go and beseech their help. And they can be problematic. So when, like, for example, when a dancer came to the land that we've just built a house on, when he came before we built it to kind of persuade the land spirit to allow us to build because the machinery kept breaking, the first thing he did was move the wandering spirits on because they're mischievous and they can really affect your life.
Yeah, it's what I remember from our last discussion, that the sort of thinking behind having a spirit house on your own property is that the spirits who do live there will live in that rather than bother you in your own house. And that's kind of one of the things that that's one of the things they're for. So, and that would be land spirits. How are they separate? Because what I learned in this one is that you have the sort of grandmother and grandfather house as well. So in terms of land spirits, what's going on there?
Okay, with the land spirits, Ajahn Sir said that the land spirits have been called down there since the formation and occupation of this land. Yeah, so they're very ancient. He described them as angels/deities. And they're the guardian spirits of the whole of Thailand, but there are different ones in different areas. And usually when you segment a piece of land up, certain angels will stay there. I don't know whether it's the same angels as on the next piece of land. Yeah, but basically, Ajahn Sir came. He said there's 2 days that you can come and have a connection to the land spirits, which are actually the 2 days that are important also for creating prayer. They're the 2 spirit days of the week, which is a Saturday and a Tuesday. So he brought Ajahn down on a Tuesday, and he, first of all, marked out the land and requested that the land spirits there allow us to build. And then the next phase is that we have designed a spirit house while allowing the influence of the angels to kind of help us design it. And then a takrut, a written spell, will go in the base. Yeah? So it needs an active spell, which I didn't know when I wrote the book. It actually looks like it needs an active spell to consecrate it. And then Ajahn will get the land spirit to reside in that house with associated models of angels, dancers, and certain animals, which again, we have to allow the land spirit to influence us as to what models to put in that house.
Do you know why it's Tuesday and Saturday?
They are the days for connecting and talking and working specifically with prayer and ghosts and spirits. That's the 2 days of the week that they are closer.
So
if you remember again from the last book, one of the things about making certain body products supernatural is if you die on the Saturday and cremated on the Tuesday, or if you die on the Tuesday and are cremated on the Saturday.
Yeah,
it's the same principle involved. Like Wednesdays for Rahu, Thursdays is for Lucy. So on certain days of the week, my normal day for offering to my main shrine is main altar is on a Thursday because I have Lucy and top monks on there. My prayer, I can do it any time. They don't necessarily mind. They just want a shot of alcohol and a cigarette, generally, and a bit of food.
Yeah.
But the higher deities are more prone to being slightly demanding as to the day that they are beseeched.
It's close to being astrological, right? Like Saturday is Saturn.
I get that feeling as well.
Yeah.
But getting that answer is a different matter.
Yeah. And so those are the 2 days ruled by the malefics. So that's Mars and Saturn. But if it was kind of a bit, if it was more, there'll be more in Vedic astrology, which I do not know at all. But like it should be something like Saturday and Monday if it was like classical Greek associations, because then you have Saturn and Moon. But it just seems like if they pick the 2 malefics, there's probably like some astrological thinking in why those days work well for those kind of spirits.
Saying that, knowing the Ajahns and knowing the Animist system here, they might just say, "Oh, it's the nicest day to talk to."
Yeah, yeah.
Sometimes the answers that they come up with are just so wonderfully simple that it's really quite embarrassing coming up with the question in the first place. But my feeling is that you are correct, but they might not understand that because it's so old.
That, I think, is in a lot of magic. I think that's what happened. This is super gay, but I remember Nigella Lawson saying something about that she learned from her mother about how to prepare a roast, and it was to sort of cut the edges and corners off before you put the beef or whatever in. And so she did that, and then she asked her grandmother one day before she died, she said, no, that's just because I had a small pan. So I had to keep cutting it so it fit in the pan. So it went down 3 generations before she asked why that was. And that's, I think that happens a lot in magic.
It's, it's like, it's like when in the interview about the 13 boys.
I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, it's like that. We never expected that answer.
No.
We never... I mean, I've always understood that everything is connected here. We meet the people we are meant to meet, even the ones who do us harm. Yeah, but sometimes when you get a literal or an explanation for what's gone on, as what the locals believe, it can be quite gobsmacking.
Yeah. Well, now that you brought it up, we should tell people, because they're listening going, yes, you are in fact referring to those boys in that cave and the billionaire who tried or who promised to save them. Tell us that. That was super cool. This is a super cool addition to the book.
Again, it's one of the things whereby I say people really need to visit if they're into this stuff. Yeah, you don't need to come and see me. Just come and visit and walk around with the eyes that you have after reading some of the book and understanding what you understand. Yeah, I'm going to veer slightly off here, because if you do that, that will take you into the magical world because you're looking at it. And if you can carry that back to your own country, I sincerely think it will help everybody in the first place. Okay, but sometimes here, when something's happened, us Westerners look at it in one way, like it was a terrible event. They shouldn't have gone in that cave so far, etc., etc. What were they up to, all the rest of it. When in fact, all they were doing was walking in the cave, where many locals go in as like some rite of passage and walk to the very end of the cave, which is it's 2 or 3 kilometers deep or more, perhaps. And it's just something the locals have done, especially the young men, as part of some coming of age sort of thing, have done that. Yeah. On this occasion, after thousands and thousands of people have been in that cave, the spirit in the cave decided to keep them. That's what the locals believe. And Adam Nikon, who lives in that region when we went to see him, who is a magnificent man, I love him to bits, he described the whole animist thinking towards why those boys were in there. And basically they consider it's related to an ancient legend and a spirit in the cave. And actually the mountain that the cave is in is shaped like a woman lying down, pregnant woman lying down. It's quite uncanny. That lady is called Nang Nong, and she was a princess in this region who ran away with a stable boy way below her, and the king was really pissed off, and he sent the army after her and all the rest of it. And they found Tam Luang cave to hide in because it was, it was comfortable and it was away from the rains, etc., etc. But only the stable boy could go out and get food and do the day-to-day stuff they needed to do. Unfortunately, he was caught by the army that was sent by the king, and they killed him. The princess didn't know this, and she was so distraught after a few days, she thought it liked him, and she committed suicide using a hat pin, which must have been particularly awful. And she has been in that cave ever since. She's been the resident spirit there, and she's been besieged all for hundreds of years in that cave. Now, when they kept the boys, after 9 days, things were looking pretty dire. People were really worried here. Everybody was hoping that they would get out, and a very, very important monk came to the cave called Krubabun Chum, who is he's kind of a walking legend magically as well. And he did a ritual at the cave to apologize to the spirit and turned around and said, they'll find them and they'll get out, all of them. Yeah? He foresaw that they would get out of the cave within 2 days. And they hadn't even, they'd be found within the cave in the next couple of days. And that's what happened. And we all know the story of, the British divers went over to get them out and did a magnificent job. But unfortunately, one of the Thai Navy SEALs died in the rescue attempt. Now, it was all happy ending. Everybody got out. It was an absolute miracle. And the relief in this country was just wonderful. It was wonderful. And I was thanked on many occasions just for being English. Yeah? That's a pretty rare event for you now. Yeah. Anyway, so this is what they reckon. They reckon Krubabun Chum is a direct descendant of the king, and he had gone to apologize to his daughter. They reckon the stable boy, they reckon the army, all the boys were the direct descendants of the members of the army who killed the boy. And the Thai Navy SEAL guy was a direct descendant of the stable boy. So when Magnon managed to keep her lover, she let the boys go.
I love it.
And since that time, Krubabun Chum, shortly after that, went on a silent retreat for 3 years, 3 months, 3 days, and 3 hours. And he's still in there. So goodness knows what's happened, but he felt the need to not speak for a few years.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. It's a
great story.
And it has that kind of resonance of something bigger than true as well as being true. I like it. It's so good.
Well, as we said earlier, there's no accidents as to who we meet according to the time.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. That's well, it's kind of like, speaking of caves and mountains, and that's a good one because it does bring us back to spirit houses, and I want to get the logic of this right. Yeah, there will be spirit houses aren't just used for domestic dwellings. You mentioned the ones that you might see on the side of the road for kind of itinerant spirits that you've bargained with, right? But they are also used for things like mountains. And is it the same? Is it like, okay, this mountain's not in a good mood and we need to work out how we get along. So a spirit house is part of that given trade?
Yes, it's basically giving due deference and making offerings to the mountain spirits. So basically it's not going to kill people or take them or do harm. There are some very, very, very strong mountain spirits. There's some very strong cave spirits as well in this country, to the point where I think I kind of stopped going into caves, but there's a couple I always take people to, one of which is just phenomenally strong.
No, that's if if it's starting to feel like you shouldn't go in, I wouldn't do it. We have some very interesting ones here, but yeah.
There was one that we went into above the temple on the way to Lampun. And it was pretty deserted, and weirdly, unusually, I actually asked the spirit house at the front of the cave to protect me while I was in there. It's not something I normally do. And we got in half a kilometre, and it was lit, but all the bulbs started disappearing or they'd blown. And I was thinking maybe not a good idea to go much further, so I put a hand out on what I thought was a banister or a railing, and it was a snake. Mm-hmm. And it was there sitting up waiting to catch the bats that was flying around, So I kind of didn't freak the guy out I was with. I just said, it's too far now, let's go back. But I was pretty freaked out.
Yeah.
And we went back down to the temple, and the monk came out for a chat, and I told him, and he's just laughing his head off, saying, "Oh, they're really dangerous snakes in there. They're all poisonous." I'm like, "Oh, thanks very much, monk." it was just a very good example of monk humour. But yeah, some of the caves here can be quite terrifying. There's one, if you ever visit Gordon, I do actually quite like going to the two that I go to. One, and got completely different feelings. One has been used for meditation for at least 1,000 years. But the other one is a very different kind of entity. It's extremely strange. There's also a shrine to a Naga in there.
Very
and
cool.
it's not for the faint-hearted.
Yeah.
Really. I have to be careful who I take to that cave, because we went with a couple, two friends, and one of them was, her walls were not strong enough, if you understand what I mean. And they were all going for her, all the things in there on the way out, and we kind of had to get her out of there, really. And she felt very unwell once we got her out. So I kind of have to be careful who I take to these places, because they can be quite intrusive on your life if we're not careful.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny how once you start operating with this language, you find the logic of it, right? So the spirit houses and this just being good business and so on. There's an example in the book that I think is, this is the right time to bring it up, because it's just after having a serious conversation. Because if we hadn't, there's something almost Seinfeld-esque about it. But tell us about the Ajahn who made a statue of himself.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you don't see it very often. I've only seen it twice. Ajahn Subin is one of the most remarkable people you will ever meet. He's like an angel, this guy. He's always happy. He's just quite incredible. Nothing is ever a problem. He just glows. He shines, yeah, in the literal sense. And he also believes that he's a reincarnated Ajahn, and he's basically probably the top authority of Lana magic, to the point where now he's moved to central Bangkok to learn central Thai magic. And people are always, they always think of him as really something quite special. And when I went to see him for his giving of Kankru to Luxits, like degree certificates for levels of knowledge, I noticed he had a statue of himself in his grounds, and his Samnak is really quite unbelievable. Unbelievably beautiful and huge, covers about 2 or 3 acres. And I've only seen this once before, and that was with Lord Popina, who's my spiritual hero. So I asked him, who made statues to himself, because it's not very Buddhist, it goes against a lot of ego things and all the rest of it. And he just said, a very important monk once told me I'd be dead at 40. So we built a statue to myself and inaugurated it and turned it into a kind of a humpayon with his personal materials inside, so that takes the hit of his karma rather than him. And I said, how old are you, John? He said, 40. I've got about 7 months to go until I know its words. And then just bursts out laughing, giggles to himself, and wanders off. He said it's not a very Buddhist thing to do, but it's a way of avoiding a death.
There are, and that's up and down English magic, that's up and down English witchcraft. There are cunning folk charms to do things like baptize chickens in your name and the name of your kids or whatever, so that if witches will send spirits and demons at you, they'll kill the chickens and not you. And it's the same logic behind putting things like, shoes and what have you in walls, is to kind of confuse people. But there's very specific witchcraft things you can do to kind of catch a curse so that it doesn't hit you. And this is one of those structural things, right? Like the words are slightly different. Like he's trying to make sure that the karma goes and hits his statue, which is of high quality, by the way. Like it's better than a chicken based on the picture. But that same idea is there structurally, right? That you can kind of deflect it by outsourcing an essential component of you so that the spirits take that instead.
Well, it's not just an essential component. The Humpayong is one of the most ancient spells in the system, and it's used quite a lot, actually, as part of other constructions. But the Humpayong is actually a spirit construction of himself by using the 32 parts of the body and the 4 elements, as we discussed in the Big Book. So what he's done is actually recreated, it's mirroring his spirit in every sense, so it pulls anything that way. And I think it's one of the reasons why the Humpayong is also one of the most popular things that people look for, because it kind of, I think it just kind of gives us a surety. And sometimes they break when they get too much of a hit. Yeah. You have to kind of retire them and then get another one to mirror you. So it's kind of an extension of that, but I think it was, times 10, because Ajahn Subin is quite an exceptional magician.
Yeah, the 32 parts of the body and 4 elements spell, there's some really interesting stuff. And again, this is one of those structural similarities, right? With my old favorite Ajahn Apichai and the wax dolls, which look incredible in there.
Yeah, well, he's doing that. Again, his knowledge is generally more central Thai than Lanao. So that's why I put in two interviews, one from Ajahn Suh, who's solely a Lanao magician, and Ajahn Apichai, who's collected knowledge from various regions, where he doesn't necessarily need any personal materials to construct your spirit and construct the spirit of the person that you want to be bound to in love. He can also do that in a curse as well. To knock the other person down through he's particularly good at constructing spirits and the spirits of people to mirror them, whereas Ajahn Suh, he can do it mentally and place each person within each doll, but generally he would prefer some personal materials, threads, cloths, hair, whatever, to fulfill the same function, but in a different system.
Is there like an in-system reason for that? Like, does Ajahn Apichai have some sort of boon or spirit agreement that allows him to kind of make figures of people without that kind of components that belong to them? Or is it just something he was born with or has accumulated over the course of his career?
No, most of the Ajahns can do both systems around here. So sometimes Ajahns, with the dolls, he prefers to put their image and their details in mentally, and I think he's capable of doing that. But Ajahn Apichai's knowledge just comes from the central region. Now, the Ajahns up here tend to know both ways to do this and will choose the best way depending on the situation or what they're doing. And it's the same kind of knowledge whereby, if they acquire some skill, but it's not necessarily from a highly supernatural source, and it might have belonged to some nasty old geezer or, somebody very unpleasant, and they will move that spirit on and put a more functional spirit within it and rebuild the spirit. So that same ability can be put into many, many different things. It basically just enables a better way of creating the magic that they're looking for.
Mm. Yeah. One of the things that was sort of fascinating about it is it's an example of transformation with time, right? So apparently, I mean, it's in the book, but they're using wax now and different material that comes in and out of fashion, much like the dodgier graveyard stuff. But it seems like historically, if you wanted to use wax, it had to come from a specifically shaped hive. That would have been quite the...
Or a hive of a certain tree, or if you have two hives on the same low branch, or if the hive touched the floor. Or actually, if the hive was above a termite mound, because you have the Earth's phallus coming up to meet it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and again, though, I think there's a lot more than that. That's only a brief description as to supernatural wax. Adán Sir, bless him, he can't get around that well because of a massive brain hemorrhage about 8 or 9 years ago. But he used to love walking in the forest and actually collecting his own wax.
Well, because that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, that's the traditional way. You know?
And you have to kind of want it more, right? To go out and sort of get a stick and Yogi Bear down a beehive. It's not just going to buy wax from a store anymore. I was thinking about that. If there's a language of beehives that you need to do this kind of stuff, like you have to have wanted that love spell.
Well, that was under the case when it was just more local.
True.
You know, originally the temple was the center of everything. It was the center even of health. You know, there's a lot of health practices from some of the old monks that's unfortunately being lost. You know, and many years ago, one of the first monks I ever met told me I was a quarter of a degree too hot. And he's right, because of a long-term condition. Yeah. But he knew just from holding a piece of horn and putting it on my head. It didn't touch me. You know, so, you know, when that was the center of that village, nothing really came into it. So they would have to go out and do everything. Whereas now you can pretty much order anything you want on the internet. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, this morning I bought something that came from next to the Cambodian border. You know, via near Bangkok, and now it's coming up to me. You know, it just makes it easier for the Adans to create things in ways that they want to create them. It saves an enormous amount of time. But I think there is a small loss of magic with that.
I would say so too. But that's the change in magic and all that kind of stuff. You have Jenx reached not the end, I guess, but a step change or kind of pivot in this journey. And so congratulations for it. But we're at the end of the show. So this surely is very easy. It's not that you've written a bunch of books or anything. What do you want people to know about the kind of like the Thai Occult project as is the books and the journey you've gone on? Like, what are the kind of like, what's the key thing that you want to convey to people by outside of Thailand by doing this, in this phase of the project? Like, what have you learned that you want us to know?
I just like people to see magic and become magic every day. I just really like to pull people away from the modern world and the modern way of thinking. It doesn't mean you don't take part in the modern world, but you can take part in the modern world from a different standpoint, and you can appreciate the world from a different standpoint. And if any of this has that effect on anybody, I am a very happy man.
Well, I'm quietly confident it already has. So, honestly, congratulations again. It's a remarkable series of documents, and I love the latest edition. The photos are off the hook. So, for people who want to know more about yourself and where to get them and all that kind of thing, lay it on us.
The Thai Occult books, if you put that into Facebook, it's there. There's the ThaiOccult.com if you want a link to the book. There's only 399 being made, and there's no PDF of this book being released. It's not necessary. It's for fans of the system of these series of work. And, just dip your toe in and see where you end up. That's what happened to me, and look where I am now.
Exactly.
And thank you very much for everything, Gordon, as well, by the way. You've been wonderful.
Well, thanks kindly. I love these chats, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you do next.
Thank you very much indeed, Captain.
Great stuff, as ever. Jenx and I actually recorded this the day before I flew to London, which was both a couple of weeks ago and a lifetime ago. And on this side of our current apocalypse, the stories hit different. What I subtextually hear now doing the editing in the songline of Thai Animism is the irrepressibility of the signal that the human world remains embedded in the spirit world through its upheavals and its structural changes, through the rise and fall of kingdoms and invaders, through changes in materia and priorities. And somewhere like Thailand, with that long and overlapping history, is a place you can just drop down into the deep time of magic. And Thai magic, the Thai experience, is itself embedded in that same global experience of human lifeways, weaving through much larger spirit ones over even longer and longer time frames, right? So flipping back through the Thai Occult Appendix now, as I'm editing the show, and this is a book that is worth your time simply on the level of being fascinating. It's also unintentionally inspirational. All those spirit houses, all those hopes and dreams for one's life and the life of one's family, all the kind of stuff that makes being human familiar because you are there as well. Apotropeia, healing, fortune telling, right? To me, humans are never more human than when we are doing magic. Ceremony is like one great in-breath of the spirit world, and on the out-breath, it's shared movement and joy in the near-term future. And I fancy not enough of us doing that at the moment. And it seems to me that in the same way depression seems to trump nutrition right when we need it most, fear seems to trump magic when we need it most. So do it. Check in with your spirits. Tell your fortunes. I'm quietly confident you will be surprised by what you find. And if you need encouragement and inspiration to return to a global rhizomatic network of spirits and magicians, do check out Jenx's latest book. Details are in the show notes, of course. It is both nourishing and enriching, as I hope this show was. Until next time.